Hello friends, thank you for joining us this evening. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. Welcome friends, readers, listeners, and viewers from across America and around the world. I'm your host, Zen Garcia. This is Secrets Revealed here on Truth Frequency Radio. We thank all of you for taking the time to join us in live broadcast. Have the great honor of being on tonight with my good friend and fellow author, Brett Thomas. Brett, are you there, brother?
I am here, brother. It's been a long time. How are you?
Yeah, I think it's been like a year or so, but I know you've been busy working on your new projects, which it's exciting because, I just did a 2-book set on the Pre-adamites in the antediluvian world and the Dragon Kings and the the Dragon Lords, the antediluvian kings. And you seem to have been writing on the same topic, of which, we'll cover some of that this evening. But if you would, give out your website, contact information, where people can go to find your work. Of course, sacredwordpublishing.com, but also on your sites, or, if you have YouTube or anything of that nature.
Okay. Yes. Brett Thomas is my name, and my email, first off, is mysterybabylon@1791.com. That's mysterybabylon, all one word, at 1791.com. And of course, as Zen said, I'm on his website right now. And mysterybabylon.com is actually my website. It's going to get a revamp pretty soon, but right now that's the current website. It's mysterybabylon.com. Simple.
Excellent. Well, before you talk about your new releases, why don't you tell people a little bit about the books you've already written and give like a general, a little bit about what they are about, the topic, the issues, the content, the titles, of course, and then we'll move into your new material.
Okay. The first book was written about 10 years ago, and it was called The Rise of Mystery Babylon. It's a series, 3 volumes now coming. The first one was called The Way of Cain, and that, as I said, came out about 10 years ago. And actually, I did a little bit revamping on that and expanded on it, and now I actually have it split into 2 volumes, and that's what I think Zen was talking about. I did a little bit of work on it, and I have part 1 just finished off the presses. So Zen, you have it on your website now too, I believe. So I'm excited about that.
Okay, cool. Well, good. I'm glad you split it up, just because it was so much material. Your volumes, your work are voluminous and cover a lot. I love the way you write, because you also share many extra biblical and extra sources, that not a lot of people know about and haven't maybe had a chance to read. And I do the same. So, I love authors that share numerous sources like that to affirm their work. Sure. So, yeah, but please continue.
Yeah, you were actually one of my inspirations when Lucifer, father of Cain. I found that one years ago when I was in the midst of researching, and that's how I got into meeting you and wanted to know more about you.
Oh, right.
But yeah. So the first one, The Way of Cain, is a look at culture and the way that people live and society and the way we relate to each other. And the way of Cain is actually mentioned in Jude. Woe to them, for they have gone in the way of Cain. So it suggests actually a cultural shift, the way people think and behave towards others and act and their worldviews, etc. So it's a look at that, and then it's, as Zen said, it's it got to be pretty large and thick. So that's why I decided to cut it in half, make it and revamp it, make it a little more readable, cut out some parts, add some more, so I can add more, because I do have more actually to put in there as time rolls on. The second book is is called in the Rise of Mystery Babylon. It's called the Tower of Babel. And again, these are both parallels of the times of Noah to today, which I will get into more. This one deals a little more with the actual political and religious elements of this whole deception that's been plaguing us since the beginning, since the Garden of Eden. We get into Edom, we get into the tower itself, Nimrod, all the people in the past, and we start to show actually how there are parallels to the way people think and come together again, the way they do it, but in a more of a deeper sense. It's actually a deeper look at things compared to the first volume. The third one is coming, and I have to get a little bit more minutes on that because it's still in the midst of the project. But this third one will be actually the same type, but actually more of a chronology from the Garden of Eden all the way up till today. So it's not going to be just showing you that there's parallels. It'll be actually a chronology of the Antichrist and how it works, and Babylon itself.
Awesome. Well, you definitely cover, some of my most favorite issues. And going back to the garden, it's, surprising to me that so many people find the things that we write about, especially with the enmity between the seed lines, and that there are two seed lines, that Cain was of the wicked one. They find this to be controversial or, contentious, and that so many are opposed to, when it is so very clear. I mean, how does Eve eating an apple lead to her pregnancy and a punishment that she's going to bring forth children in sorrow? It just does not make sense. Adam, having to work the soil to feed the progeny that are going to come forth, and that there's this enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, and certainly Cain, being a murderer, a liar, and a deceiver, does not have the disposition of Adam, and his name meaning acquired possession, certainly shows to me that he was the stepchild of Adam. But can you, comment on that, and then we'll move into some of your other, some of the other things that you cover in your work, and then we can talk about the new material.
Sure. I totally agree with you, Zen, on that. Even in the Bible, even in the New Testament, they talk about perdition and the son of perdition. Right. And they even say, I think it's the son of perdition, it was a murderer from the beginning, right? And who was the first murderer? So perdition actually has a meaning of worthlessness and low self-esteem and that type of mindset. Now, again, one of the punishments that I believe that actually the serpent had was this ultimate worthlessness and self-esteem, total. And his son, again, son of perdition, had this same paranoia, could never find any peace anywhere. And in fact, one of his punishments was that he was supposed to roam about aimlessly, right, in the land of Nod, in the land of wandering. And I don't believe that this wandering was just a physical thing. I believe there was a lot of wandering in his mind and his soul and way that he looked at things.
Right. Yeah, and even one of the names for Satan, Beliar, also means worthlessness. And so that fits right along in concept. But so the new stuff and the new material, you did send me the chapter headings, but can you talk about your inspiration, what led you to start looking into the beginning, and then how the gap and the gap theory, the Pre-adamites, and some of the other issues that you cover in this particular, but what led you down that road, and what kind of inspired your research?
Well, actually, this new material you're talking, that's actually the revamp of the first volume that I did. So it is new in a way, but it's still it's a remake. and split into the 2 volumes. So that being said, this was my first book. This was the first volume,
Okay.
The Way of Cain.
But you added
And
all this to the beginning?
I'm sorry?
You added all of this material to the beginning of that
No,
book?
this was still there. All of this
Okay.
yeah, it was all there. Like I said, it was just revamped some and just made a little more readable. But yeah, it was all there. And it pretty much does start at the beginning. And the reason
Uh-huh.
is because I lost my father a couple decades ago, and I really tried to, because he was basically telling me on his deathbed, don't ever end up like me, etc. So I did research, and I tried to figure out, what was going on, what was his mindset, why do people die, all these thoughts that everybody has, and over time, I would get some answers, and then I started out in the psychology mode where I was trying to figure out like how people think and why. And as every question I found an answer, a new question would open up. It seemed to, and I'd say, let me research that. So this was over 20 years ago. So as I would keep going, I would be writing notes, and I would collect them together. And after a while, I just thought, let's just put a book together. I have all this information, and I think it would be good to help others. It'd be like a self-help thing. So I did that, and I started getting all this information. And as things became more deep, and I started getting down to the deeper part of it, it started going into the spiritual realm, the supernatural realm, the realm of the Bible, the realm of the past, and that's what shaped this whole volume, and all 3 of them actually. So that's where we started. And this beginning of this is just how I was managed to put it together. I figure at the beginning, I'm going to start at the very beginning, the beginning.
Yeah.
So that's why we started with the gap theory in the first chapter.
Right on. Okay, cool. I just, it was a long time ago that I had read that book, and I do remember reading that material. Just, I thought you had added to and elaborated more upon that. But so let's talk about, let's move through a progression, as far as your second volume and the split off and the focus on the Tower of Babel. Because and a lot of people don't understand this, that with the enmity between the seed lines, the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent, we have this playing out all throughout history. And we see that even the battles between what ended up between Ishmael and Isaac, and then also Jacob and Esau, and then their children, and then also, the children of Abraham, Joseph in Egypt, and then entering into Canaan with the giants, that all of this was a continuation of the war. Even the Tower of Babel, Nimrod, him becoming the first world ruler, and as I cover in one of my books, that he was given these garments of power. And I noticed that you also comment on this in your books as well. And this is a topic that not a lot of people know about as well. But Ham actually stole these garments of power from Noah, gave them to Cush, and they ended up being given to Nimrod. And he utilized them to unite the world and to become, the conqueror over his cousins, brothers, the other progeny of the other children of Noah. But can you talk about moving into your second volume, and then we can talk about the new material as well, your third volume, what you've been working on? Because I'd like to focus on that. Well, actually, a lot of people may not have heard about or have a chance to study your work. So we can, cover some of all of it just to pique their interest and to give them an idea as to why they would want to go purchase your volumes, read your material, and study the work that you've put out.
Okay. I think the best thing to do the work on at Zen would be eventually I would probably, since we're here or I'm back here and I'm ready to actually meet with you more often so we could actually start teaching from these books. I hope we can call it teaching, but I'm just going to share what I have learned and researched. And like you said, I did a lot of extra biblical work because even though I believe the Bible is the final inspired word of God, and I do not question that. I do not try to undermine it at all. But I believe I believe God asks for us. He said he does have mysteries there, and he says, I think in the Bible, for us to go search them out or seek them out.
Yes.
So, as I think everybody is also given that gift of discernment, where they can make up their mind and they can see when something is dragging you the wrong way or pointing in the wrong direction. And they just have, I think God gives it in his still small voices. He gives those feelings that you just have where you can say, okay, I think this might be some positive information and this might be some negative information. So all these extra biblical sources and things I've researched over these decades, I think they can help us figure out answers that might not have been known if we only studied just the Bible. But don't you agree with that?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's one of my core beliefs is that we can learn from this other ancient material, and that in studying it, certainly we learn the deeper aspects of what has remained ambiguous or been left out, or purposely excluded, and but I do believe, yes, that the King James Bible, that it is the foundational as far as the faith and establishing and being the Word of God, that it's prophetic and it can be trusted. But I do know that things have been left out, just like even the name of God being removed, and allusion to the word of the Lord also. And so things like that. And the Targum version shows us the more ancient translation as to what is missing from our modern English translations. And so, yeah, I think studying all of this material, that we get a good idea and a deeper understanding, reading like the parallel studies that Rob and I have been doing on the Pentateuch. I mean, we're like, these are 2-hour shows, and we're like 25, 30 shows in, and we're still on Genesis chapter 33. I mean, it's insane the amount of material that is out there.
Yeah, I've pretty much anything I could find as far as research over these 20 years, I've researched and I've grabbed. So, you could be confident that I have done my best to exhaust every ancient written evidence I can find, beyond the Talmud, beyond the Midrash. But with that said and done, that helps us get possible answers to what you were saying earlier about the clothes, those special garments.
Right.
We wonder, if Nimrod conquered everybody, okay, if you read if you only have a limited thought and limited information coming to you, you think, okay, how did he conquer everybody? And if you read deeper into it and read into some more sources and put it all together, these sources actually say that these garments, when Nimrod would wear them, actually caused animals to prostrate or come down, kneel.
Yes.
Prostrate.
Yes.
And kneel in front of Nimrod. And so that's why when they show these ancient pictures of a Nimrod stabbing a lion with a sword, that's one reason, because the lion really didn't have much of a chance, even though it might have attacked him. And these, just as you said, these garments were very special garments, and even some sources might actually say that they were actually from the serpent himself. That God stripped it off of him and gave it to Adam. Actually, right? You heard that? Gave it to Adam himself.
It made it from the skin that the serpent has shed. Yes.
Right. Yes. Right. And Adam would walk around the garden and same thing. Everybody would just bow, kneel, and respect his authority in the garden.
Right.
And then, as you said, he passed it on, and eventually it got to Noah. And then after the flood, as you said, Ham stole it and gave it to Cush. So that's, and believe it or not, I think it even went farther than Nimrod. I think it went into his son or his grandson. And you've heard about the story with Esau when he was when this third generation of Nimrod was hunting one day. Esau actually murdered him. He caught him in an ambush, chopped off his head, and took the garments. And now Esau, the brother of Jacob, had the garments in his possession. And I think he buried him in the ground, and Rebecca grabbed him, I think.
Yes,
Esau,
Rebecca.
their mother. So these
Gave
garments, gave them to Jacob, and then I think they disappeared after that. But these garments.
Well, they ended up actually going to Judah, and then he lost them when he gave up his rod, mantle, and ring to Tamar. And when a court case was brought against Tamar, Jacob actually took them back from Judah and then gave them to Joseph. And so Joseph had the garments and the rod of wonder, the staff of God. And when he died, the Egyptians took them, put them in the royal treasury, and then Ruel, who's Jethro, the father-in-law of Moshe, he took them with him when he left and went eastward to Midian. He became the high priest there. And then when Moshe, 40 years later, also went east, running from Pharaoh, and went to the land of Midian, he was able to pull the sapphire staff, the rod of wonder, out of the ground, and he was given Zipporah in marriage, and he was the one that then received the garments and the rod of wonder and used them not only to enter into Pharaoh's presence, because Pharaoh had these animals, bears and cheetahs and lions, protecting his household and his palace, but also he used them to divide the Reed Sea and to battle the giants, and also to bring forth water from the rock. And they were passed down even after that, but and that there are stories about that, but for the most part, the narratives gets very diminished after Moshe.
Right.
But yeah, it's an incredible story.
Yeah, that was probably the rod he used to when he was in front of Pharaoh and he threw it down and it turned into a snake, probably, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Yes.
Amazing. And it's something, once you hear these extra accounts and you think, oh, well, it connects the dots. This makes sense. That's where he could have gotten this. This is where he could have gotten that. So, yeah. So back to part 2 actually goes a lot deeper than part 1, as I was saying, deeper into the actual the lives of Adam and Eve and Cain especially. And you just get to learn about their characters and learn about what they're all about, and then some of the punishments we talked about, as you mentioned, where Eve was cursed in childbirth, and you got to wonder why. She just ate a harmless fruit. Why would she be cursed in childbirth? But this, if you read more, if you start to understand and see the other side of things that we may have been restricted from, then things start to make sense. And I'm connecting the dots here. Okay, I could see why she would be punished for that sin if she had done something sexually.
Right. Yeah, why would they, after eating this fruit, why would they cover their genitals,
Yeah, right.
And then hide themselves from the presence of the Most High.
Yeah. Right. Yes, exactly. Well, they knew they were naked now. I mean, okay, what does that have to do with eating an apple or eating a fruit? What's the connection? So,
yes.
Yeah,
exactly.
So that gets you into deeper characters and deeper background into the whole Garden of Eden. Like some of the things I could throw in real quick is like the Garden of Eden could have actually been a step it would have been up on a little plateau, and it actually could have had a huge fence or wall around it to keep undesirables out. And then that sparks the thought, okay, who are the undesirables? Why would they have that? And maybe Satan or Samael was one of them. Actually,
Samael, yes.
Right. That's basically Satan, the same name as ancient name. But maybe that was also a spiritual protection for them inside the garden, that he could not be going there. And that it just sparks a lot of thoughts. Okay, why was this? Why could have this? Why that? So anyhow, moving forward in that, beyond these deeper thoughts.
Hold on 1 second, Brett.
Yes, sir.
We're at the first break, so we will pick it up on the other side. But just so people know, Samael also means the angel of death and the viper of God. So, but we'll be right back, everyone.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
With commerce being monopolized by major corporations, we feel a responsibility to return to handmade goods and to support individuals in the community. Sacred Word Publishing wants to encourage truth seekers to support each other, and one of the best ways we can do that is through offering this centralized marketplace where everyone's homemade products can be easily accessed by our fellow members in the body of Christ. Would you be interested in offering your handcrafted items in our store? Email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com. Support the truth-seeking community by going to www.swpmarket.com. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Real people, real radio.
Initiating the truth frequency.
This is Truth Frequency Radio.
And in those days, there were giants in the land, and the sons of the angels of God looked upon the daughters of men and found them fair, and took of them wives, and their sons became of old great men of renown. So they have been mixing with us on a genetic level since the time of Enoch and Ezekiel's will.
Here on earth we're intrigued by the sun, moon, and stars. And imagine there's got to be planets like ours. So conceive of a face on the surface of Mars. So in need of a meaning and purpose we've lost. And indeed they believe that these might be our gods, or that maybe with time we'll do right and evolve and eventually reach what they seek and then solve all the problems of man. But they really don't know that they fall, and the works of our hands are but just filthy rags. So we travel the lands to dig up our past time, our lapses, and with it are much of the facts. Some imagine that gods came in alien class.
All right, welcome back everybody for our second portion. I'm going to turn it back over to you, Brett, and let you finish your thought. You were speaking about the garden and, you know, the consequences of Eve eating the fruit, and just how all that doesn't make sense unless you understand that it was a physical seduction. You know, Paul speaks about in 2 Corinthians that the serpent beguiled Eve, and that word beguile means wholly seduced. And, you know, a seduction is a physical where the woman, and it also says that, you know, Eve lost her virginity. And the only way a woman can lose her virginity is by being physically, sexually seduced, corrupted, in this case by the serpent.
Right. They compare, I think Paul says he compares Eve with someone who was not a chaste virgin. Exactly.
Yes, right.
Why would he say that if it
Right.
was just, you know, hypothetical or something
Yes.
that's to do with their morals?
Right.
Yeah, and another thing that is very interesting, because a lot of the naysayers will say, well, obviously Genesis 4:1 says that Adam knew Eve and she conceived and bare Cain. Again, I appreciate their thoughts, and I always thought that when I read that, but the more I do research and the more you research actually into the original Hebrew, you find that there could be actually more than one meaning for every one of those words, just like English. Hebrew has, and I'm not pressing that I'm an expert in Hebrew, please, but I've been, you know, studying just to see possible other meanings for verses that you can use. Look at the strong numbers, and you can see that there are multiple meanings for a lot of these verses. In this particular case, it's another meaning of the word "knew" in that verse is to understand, and Eve and Adam could have simply understood what was going on with this conception of Eve. And I actually, in my book that I have, I actually break down these verses into the original Hebrew and show how they actually could mean something else. Very simple, because when they translated these older texts into English and other languages, these translators probably already had preconceived notions and thoughts in their minds. So, okay, well, we're always taught that Adam and Eve got together and Cain had to be their child because Adam and Eve were the only people on the earth at the time. So let's just say make it mean sexually that they came together, and that was the only two that came together, and Eve had to be their child, right? But of course, then you get something a conflict in where basically when Seth is born, Adam looks at Seth and says, "This is the first child I had that actually, or first child that actually looks like me, or the first child out there." Right. Okay, right? That actually resembles Adam. Okay, so if because I believe actually Abel and Cain, I believe they were twins, because they were twin sons of the serpent. Abel made the right choices, and Cain didn't. I mean, just because even if you're a son of the serpent, you still can make right choices, as far as I'm concerned. That's why God allows people to graft onto his belief. You don't have to be a child of Adam to be good. But again, that flies in the face of everything a lot of people try to push nowadays. You know, it's not my fault, etc. So Cain was a problem. Abel was a problem. He actually made the choice to do the right sacrifice, and Cain took him out. And I also believe that according to the research, this is all about 97% of this is all due to research and things that I have found in these ancient texts and other works of writing, is that Cain was actually born with a shining countenance. It was born, he almost looked like an angel when he came out. Eve was really surprised. That's probably what prompted that verse in the Bible that where Eve said, I have somebody from the Lord. Remember that, Zen, that verse?
Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
Remember that?
Yeah, I was just going to say that in the Aramaic Targum, which again dates back, to the 4th century BC, that verse, it says, and Adam knew his wife Hava, who had desired the angel, semicolon, and then she bare Cain and said, I have received a man from the angel of the Lord. Yeah, and then it says, and she added to bear from her husband Abel. So I don't believe that Abel was a child of the serpent, only because it also says that in Genesis 3:15 that there's going to be enmity between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And in the Targum it says the seed of thy son and then the seed of her sons. And the reason I believe it says the seed of her sons is because Abel was murdered by Cain, and then we see that Seth is his replacement. And even the word in Hebrew, Sheth, means compensation, replacement, and substitution. And so I believe that Abel was a child, the first child of Adam and Eve, and that being murdered by his half-brother Cain, that would be the prophetic fulfillment of what became the enmity between these two bloodlines. But
okay,
that's
well,
just
we both have thoughts. Yeah, we both have our thoughts.
Yeah.
Chris thinks it's more of I think it's more of a physical thing as far as that, and you think it's a little different. That's fine. We can, we don't have to think for everything, but we both come to the same conclusion pretty much, right? So that's the important thing. So moving on, and I'll just kind of a quick review of the book, the second one, the third one, before I start into the first one here.
Sure.
And as we move on, I do get into more of the angels and the way life was before the flood, because obviously my take on the seed lines is that they were alive and well all the way up to Jesus' time. And before the flood, there was an attempt because these fallen angels was actually, they're terrestrial, and they were able to mate with human women back then, and he actually says that in the Bible, but of course they try to knock it and say it's only sons of Shem against the bad sons of Cain, etc. But there's more to it, obviously, as you go deeper and go after the flood. So, but what I'm getting to as far as before the flood, this attempt to nullify the prophecy of God that basically was Genesis 3:15, the Provo Evangelium, that said that there will be enmity between the two, and one will actually slay your head, and you will hurt his heel, which goes to Jesus, as far as I researched. To stop that bloodline, you agree? Okay, good. Yes. To stop that bloodline from being born, these angels were just trying to infiltrate any women around, as many women as they could, to just stop the births from happening at all. And I don't know, I'm sure you're familiar with up to Mount Hermon, and the pious, the sons of Seth, were actually trying to hide out up there because all of these things were happening down below, and God does not want that fallen angel seed in this bloodline. He just doesn't. The male fallen angel seed, that would just nullify the prophecy. It would corrupt it. And a perfect God needs a perfect seed line. So these last holdouts were up to Noah finally, and that's why Noah was so special, because there were only a few people left up on this hill, Mount Hermon, and they kept coming down the mountain and sinning with these people, with this whole community that was down there. So that's the reason for the flood. One of the reasons, besides it being so corrupt, God was basically said, okay, you guys are almost getting rid of all these people of Adam and Eve's seed I've got to do something to stop this, because a perfect God makes a perfect promise, and it has to be fulfilled if that's the kind of God he is. So that's exactly what happened. So Noah was born, and God said, to stop all this progression and this direction of how everything is going, you're going to bring a few people through, and we can start afresh. And that's basically the reason for the flood. So after the flood, we talk a little bit more, and obviously the giants are still around. We've Og and a lot of the Anakim, right? They're all still around, and they're all causing problems, like you talked about, like the Philistines, and you got Goliath, of course. Right. All of that is remnants of what happened before the flood. And then we get into another story about Esau, which is very important, because Esau, this struggle between Esau and Jacob just never ends, and it continues up to this day. It's an amazing, huge story that nobody really ever talks about, right?
Yes, Esau, his descendants are Rome and the Catholic Church, and all that. Mm-hmm. Contention is still ongoing. Mystery Babylon, as you also talk about it. So yeah, all that is ongoing, even with the destruction of the temple by Rome and Edom.
Oh yeah.
And so yeah, so
yeah,
yes.
We'll talk about more. I'm sorry to interrupt you. We'll talk about more into Edom as we progress in our talks, because we can not do the same as you were doing too with those weekly talks or whenever we get together.
Oh yeah,
again.
Absolutely, that'd be great.
Yeah, because you're absolutely right about Rome, because everybody doesn't know, or a lot of people don't know. It's like they say that actually Edom actually had Zepho, I think, is in the book of Jasher. Zepho was one of the descendants of Edom, and Esau. Esau is actually the same as Edom, but they call them Edomites back in the Bible because of the color, red. Red is Esau's color, and there's a lot of reasons why, besides just that they said he had some red hair on him, etc. There was bloodshed. There's all these different colors, and you notice that Rome took the color red too when they have their flags, the Roman Empire, and etc. So they said Zepho was one of these descendants of Esau, and he eventually, there was a long fight in Egypt, etc., between them and the Israelites, and eventually he ended up in what would be Italy, and when they basically started the city of Rome and the people up there. So he influenced these people how to be strong in war and how to fight, and of course some of them mixed with these people up in the Italian peninsula, but basically that's why we have such an association with Edom to Rome and the Roman Empire. And you're absolutely right, because if Jesus was a Jew, an Israelite, which he was, I believe, and you have the Romans crucifying him, there's the battle again. You have the battle because the Romans basically wanted him dead, partly, and it wasn't just them. Of course, it was the corrupt establishment with the Pharisees and the Sadducees, but that fight still goes on, and that's what I cover a lot in this second volume. Also, the Lost 10 Tribes, I get into that, and I get into the wheat and the tares, and that type of topic. But it gets quite extensive, but we can get into that as time goes on. The third volume I get into, like I said, it's going to include things that are not in the first two, but it's going to start at the very beginning again and get just even more deeper into what all happened and what all the garden is about and what all Genesis is really talking about. Because as I'll talk with next, I'm going to explain a little bit what Babylon is. I'm going to explain what this parallel is, what we're talking about with the days of Noah and the times of now.
Yeah, absolutely. That all sounds great. And, you and I talking about these issues will be able to trace this war as it ensues all throughout history. Because again, a lot of people don't understand that even, in my books, I take it back even to the war in heaven, and the separation of light and darkness, the division of the forces of legion, the good angels, the bad angels, the rebellion of Satan, who became the adversary, Lucifer, all of that. I mean, that was really the origin of what became the great contest, as I call it, the contention between the angels that followed Satan and those that stayed loyal to the Most High. And we see that even in with our coming into the flesh now, that we are given chance to redetermine our allegiances, to follow one of two masters, and that this war in heaven is raging now within us, and we have this battle, this contest, the influence of the angels within us to lead us to good or evil, to follow, to be tempted by sin, or to follow our spiritual paths and to embrace the narrow way. And so this war is ongoing, and it's now the enmity between the seed lines as it progresses. And so as you said, this is with us even now, even with what we see as the children of Cain, the seed of Cain, sitting on all the thrones of the world and pushing the New World Order and the agenda of it, that they are wanting to bring forth world government in order to hand it to the Antichrist, the son of perdition, and that the Antichrist also represents the ongoing battle of what is, the true Messiah and the false one. And that this leads also to the harvest at the end of days, the separation of the wheat and the tares, the goat and the sheep. And so this, this battle, this enmity, this war between the bloodlines, it will continue till the second advent of Christ. And that the determination of who is a wheat and who is a tare, that, also it determines who will be numbered with the elect and honored to have the privilege to enter into New Jerusalem for the 1,000 years of the millennial rest. And so all of those things are also associated and connected with, even there's such precise mention and concentration of who was born of whom, the genealogies. And I show that not only in Luke chapter 3 do we see that Cain is excluded from Yahushua's bloodline, but also in the Book of the Bee and the Cave of Treasures, that there's two genealogies in those two manuscripts as well that show that Cain was not part of the bloodline of the Messiah. And again, even Noah being pure in his generations, that unless you understand the reasons why these genealogies are carefully cited and written down so perfectly and with care, it just doesn't make sense. And a lot of people skip over that material because they don't realize as to what it is alluding to, and that there are these two bloodlines that, like Cain's genealogy is found Genesis chapter 4, and then Adam's begins in Genesis chapter 5 with Seth because Abel was murdered. And so, those kind of things are connected to this knowledge, but this revelation, but most people don't understand it. And they don't teach it in the seminaries or the Sunday schools or during, church sermons. Nobody speaks about these things. And I think you, myself, and Dr. Joy are the only ones that really write about these issues in really diligent detail.
Yeah,
And
they
so
had
I applaud you for that.
Yeah.
You're good. Go ahead, brother.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, they had to make it clear in the Bible about these generations, I believe, because again, God made a promise. He made a prophecy, and it has to come true if he's a perfect God. So basically, he knew, I'm sure, assuredly, that there will be a lot of naysayers out there that would try to look, and there are, as we see everywhere. They're trying to nitpick the Bible. Oh, it's, contradiction here. So that's why it was so thoroughly written down, because again, there had to be that side of the seed line to defeat the serpent's head, which we will talk about. But again, we know that's Jesus coming back and his crucifixion. So, but again, if there's one seed line there that was so carefully written, couldn't there be another seed? There has to be another seed line, the other one somewhere.
Right.
Of course, but that's very hidden. Nobody knows what that is, or hardly anybody knows.
Yes.
It's interesting that you talked about, because when I hear that, I just did a little research on the word pagan, and when you hear the word pagan, one of the definitions for that is anything that is not from God, and it makes sense. Our beliefs and thoughts, even not believing that there is a God, agnostic, thing like that.
Yes.
And it does, if you think about if you follow that definition, all of that which is pagan, which is majority of the world nowadays, and they're cramming us into a little ball here, and they're just trying to squeeze us out or breed us into an extinction. That's their work. So again, there's two sides, the two bloodlines. The ruling part, the people who live in this other side might not be caring or think that consciously that they are, which I understand that. But there are people at the top pulling the strings and trying to manipulate people, which I totally believe, and I'm sure you do too, right?
Yes, absolutely, right.
So from that said and done, how about if we start a little bit towards the revamping, and I'd like to just introduce everybody into a little bit what Mystery Babylon actually means, because I talk about it. You hear about it in the Bible, Revelation 17:5, and then Mystery Babylon the Great, okay, excuse me, mother of harlots and abominations on the earth. That's in Revelation, okay. We have, why would we say mystery? Well, first of all, okay, because actually it's obvious, something hidden, something that's obscure from us, from our thinking, from what we see every day. And Babylon, why would it be Babylon? What's the significance of a city that's been destroyed for thousands of years, maybe?
Right.
And the reason why the word Babylon, actually, Babel comes from two words, Ba and Bel. And Ba is actually the gate, and Bel is actually B-E-L or Baal, which is, I found, actually to be the serpent of the Garden of Eden. So, gate of their god, the gate of the serpent. So the serpent, as we will find out over our talks here, Zen, and I'm sure I'm just talking about everybody else that might be interested, is that the serpent will actually be part of this great top leader god that is really behind a lot of things and pulling the strings. That's where you get Babylon, is because of that. So he's the Mystery Babylon the Great, mother of harlots and abominations. Okay, harlots, obviously, symbolic people who have sold their souls for maybe worldly gain or something that they can get out of it, maybe out of this world, money, probably longer life, something that they have sold their souls out. And abominations, obviously, a lot of those things that are against God, that's obviously in the Bible. So this vast majority of this secular, you can call it secular world around us, is whether they know it or not, or whether they want to be, it's crowding us into an extinction, and that's basically part of the plan of the top people. It's very simple, right?
Yes, right.
Okay, so let's go into the first volume, like I said, the first revamp that I have, and it's called The Way of Cain, because obviously we're talking about this way of thinking that so many people around us, you could even call it political correctness, because it is, in a way, that there are people pulling the strings up on top. There are movers and shakers that are actually saying, okay, think of it this way, think of it that way. And another interesting part is God always had a problem with man's interpretation of things throughout the Bible. We talk about, and even in Judges, where they talk about, well, man did what he thought was right, and etc. Okay, we have that today. It's called political correctness. It's called humanism, secular humanism. Oh, we don't have to believe in God. We believe man will be the measure of all things, and a man will eventually figure out all these problems by himself. We came from whatever we came from, whether it be an ape. We didn't have a God as far as creation. It just happened. Taking God out of everything.
Right.
God.
Yes.
Okay, this world somehow became round, and it became formed by a big bang. It's not flat. There's not an underworld. There's not a dome. There's nothing. Again, notice all that stuff that became popular around the Renaissance because, again, they're pulling strings. They're getting people in tune to other thoughts rather than the Bible. So let's go back. Let's go start at the beginning, because now that actually this first volume is starting at the very beginning. And actually, I have a little quote here from Carl Sagan. It said, "You have to know the past to understand the present." And that's what basically quote is attributed to him.
Hey, hold on, brother. Hold on. We'll be right back, everyone, for second hour.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
With commerce being monopolized by major corporations, we feel a responsibility to return to handmade goods and to support individuals in the community. Sacred Word Publishing wants to encourage truth seekers to support each other, and one of the best ways we can do that is through offering this centralized marketplace where everyone's homemade products can be easily accessed by our fellow members in the body of Christ. Would you be interested in offering your handcrafted items in our store? Email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com. Support the truth-seeking community by going to www.swpmarket.com. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
And the woman beheld Samael, the angel of death, and was afraid. Yet she knew that the tree was good to eat, and that it was medicine for the enlightenment of the eyes, and a desirable tree by means of which to understand. And she took of its fruit and did eat, and she gave to her husband with her, and he did eat. And the eyes of both were enlightened, and they knew that they were naked, divested of the purple robe in which they had been created. That's Genesis chapter 3, verse 6 from the Aramaic Targum. And it's interesting that here in the other versions it says, and the serpent, it speaks of the serpent, and yet in this particular verse it names the serpent as Samael, the angel of death, which is very interesting. Brett, turn it back over to you, brother.
Yes, I actually heard one of the accounts that I researched is that Samael could not actually come into the garden, as we talked a little bit earlier. He had that wall around, and I think it actually it also helped keep out spiritual undesirables. So he found a way in, and how he found the way in was the serpent himself.
Yes.
And
yes.
basically he had a conversation with the serpent, and he says, "Hey, I'll be your tongue if you let me possess you, and we'll both go into the garden and we will trick Eve." And once, like you said, when you read, once Eve realized that she had sinned, the real angel of death made his self shown, and that's why she saw Samael too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
Yep, that's an interesting story.
Okay,
but let's
so
continue. I'll turn it back over to you.
This first volume, as I said, The Way of Cain, is more of it would be the first one if anybody is interested in it, because it does start, it's the one that I, back in the late 90s, where I did a lot of the research, so it has more of the more common other sources that would be able to put information in here. So it's a good starting point. And right off the bat, what I start talking about are these two parallel existences or parallel worlds that we're talking about. And what I simply mean by that is a quote by Jesus himself. But as the days of Noah were, so also shall the coming of the Son of Man be. So he made a prediction. He said, okay, pretty much how life was lived, worldviews, how things got so bad and corrupted back around the time of Noah. It could be before the flood, it could be after, because Noah was supposed to have lived, 350 years after the flood? So, and even a little bit before, all that has a great significance to the times of when the coming of the Son of Man, which we all know and think as the end times. So one way to figure out, okay, are we heading down that path, is to look back and to find out and discover what actually and all might have actually went around and what happened at the days of Noah, and use that as a parallel. And the more research I did, the more that I actually found that there were a lot of parallels from that time to today. And that's what I meant by that. And that's where we start. I think, as Zen would probably agree with me, a lot of these stories in Genesis were very potent to understanding who the enemy was. For example, the two seed lines, and understanding where it's been taken and where it's on its way to. And I've heard a good quote that they said the enemy hates the Bible the worst, and one is Genesis and one is Revelation. And he hates Genesis because it tells people where he's been or where he comes from, and they hate Revelation because it tells people where he's going. And I believe that wholeheartedly. So that's why you see so many cover-ups and so many that could never happen. The serpent and the seed and seed with Eve. Oh no. You hear that so much, people laugh it off, and it's because it's threatening, it's exposing, it's something that somebody doesn't want the public to know about. And again, if everybody is so open to be free and understand and want to learn, and everybody should be so wonderful to each other, why suppress these things? Why not just let people read it and understand it and make up their own minds? I mean, do you see any reason why it should be suppressed?
No, not at all. But again, in my opinion, because people don't understand that, we are in a war and that the enemy is trying to keep itself covert and hidden from the rest of the world. That's the only reason why. And again, because we don't understand that, or most people of the children of Adam, the sons of Adam, don't understand that, and that there is this bloodline, this lineage, the children of the devil fighting against us and hiding their presence. That's the only reason, that's the only way to make sense of it, is by understanding that.
Right. They will hide that, of course, because they don't want exposure. But it's just,
exactly.
To me, it seemed just too strange how so many things, especially within the last year, few months, how these things are taking all these strange turns, and
Right.
people are falling for it. They're falling for it, and they're saying, "Oh, okay, well, whatever you say, we'll do this, we'll do that." It's just
Right.
But once you read some of these things, and once you learn, especially about how things were back then, and you can see, wow, okay, maybe this corrupt system back then that was actually started back then might still continue, because people of these faiths, in these pagan faiths and etc., brag about how old their faiths are and how they go way back. Okay, where do they go back to, and where do they come from?
Right.
Maybe
Yes.
it's all from the Garden of Eden. Well, when words lose their meaning, people lose their liberty. I mean, that's an interesting quote that we have, and that's kind of true. Farther you are away from the originals, the farther you are away from the truth. Another good quote that I have. So, what I want to get into now is the first interesting thing, because if we're going to talk about the beginning and Zen, and it's kind of interesting, like you said to me earlier, it's interesting that we're both kind of on these same topics now. So maybe we can mesh up, talk, get information off each other. The first one that I want to get into, the first one I want to get into is the gap theory. That's, again, because we're going to talk about the beginning. Fine, I'm excited to talk. We've got so much to talk about. There's so much things in these books that we can talk about. So let's start day one here at the beginning. Do you get into the gap theory at all, or talk much about it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great.
Yeah, that's one of the predominant themes of the Pre-adamites and the antediluvian world. I cover the first world age and the destruction of it, and how it's mentioned in 2 Peter chapter 3. The world that then was.
That then was now, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, Zen and I may differ a little bit on this. Who knows? I'm sure everybody has their own thoughts, but I will give my research and what I found over these ancient documents and all these old texts and such about the gap theory. So,
yes, please.
I think that, obviously, I'm sure we agree that there, in between Genesis 1:1 and Genesis 1:2, is where a possible gap in time could exist. In Genesis 1:1, we have, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Okay, and then we have in Genesis 1:2, we have, and the earth was without form and void. Okay, again, what we'll hear is a lot from a lot of the naysayers, a lot of the people, because we're fighting tradition. Zen and I, right? We're fighting tradition. We're fighting what people are told to think in college, and this goes back generations and even probably hundreds of years. So we are fighting presuppositions of how these things should actually mean. But again, I did a lot. I actually researched the original Hebrew on these verses, and there's an interesting word in the Genesis 1:2, which actually says, "And the earth was without form and void." That word "was," actually, it could come off to be "to be," T-O-B-E. So, as like causative, rather than just saying, "Oh, it started, it was without form." Could it?
Or became, or becomes.
Right. The world, did the
Right.
world fall out? Did the world come to be without form and void? That would make sense, looking at the
Right.
original Hebrew here. Okay. So
Absolutely.
it all. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, yeah, I think it's very important to look at the original Hebrew, because in doing that study, I concluded the same, that the word haya there, which is the Hebrew word, means to be or to become or becomes. And so,
Right.
as you said, causatively, it was a result, a consequence of something occurring. And then,
Right.
looking at the other words, the tohu wabohu, we see that, it means and implies that the earth, it actually says the primeval earth became or becomes uh, a deserted wasteland and an indistinguishable ruin. And so those words, wasteland and ruin, are consequence of something that occurred. And so, but yeah,
Okay.
please continue.
Right. Why would God create something as a consequence of a ruined ecosystem or right,
Right.
or
Or
world
make it
or
imperfect.
right? Why would it be that way? A perfect God doesn't make things imperfect and start it out as a wreck and
Right.
void. And it even says in another verse in the Bible, I could pick it up, it's in the book, but it says basically God did not form things void. He did not form things in a void. So
Yeah.
it only makes,
Isaiah chapter 45, verse 18.
man, you are sharp. Good job. Okay. So it only makes sense to kind of think about that, because again, if we had that to be in there rather than was, it would prompt speculation and wonder what happened in between. I'm not against science at all. I'm not against, because they talk about the Earth being very old. They talk about even there being other extinctions, and quite possibly there could have been other extinctions. There could have been other civilized orders of this world, and maybe God destroyed them for whatever reason. But that's not for us to know, because I believe it even says in the Bible there's something, that things that we're not even supposed to know, so just don't bother. So I could agree that the world itself, the physical Earth, could be a lot older than the 6,000 years that we hear Usher talking about, and a lot of the people who do these timelines. It could be, and that would help. The gap theory is something that would help point to something like that. Again, I'm not coming from a science point of view. I'm coming because I don't believe that science has the whole story, because there's so much more to look at that science can't prove. I mean, if you're going to follow science strictly, then you really shouldn't believe in God at all, right? If it really comes down to it, because you can't prove it,
Because they
you
deny
can't see
God.
it.
Yeah.
Yes, so all these Christians who are scientists, that would be a struggle in my view. But I'm not saying that we have to be strict believers in a 6,000-year-old Earth, and a strict believer in a worldwide flood, and a strict believer in a lot of things that have been traditionally given to us. I want to research, and my mind has changed on a lot of things over the years through the research, and this is one of them. And there could have been, if there was, then that leads us to possibly agree with a lot of people's conjecture and thoughts, like, okay, what about the dinosaurs? This and that. Maybe there were dinosaurs way before Adam and this present time, but again, that could have been one of the cycles that of a world. I call them the world because there's a difference between world, the word world, and earth. You've got the earth as the physical sphere, place that we live on, and the world is the organized cosmos that we live under and within. Like this is our present world. We have all these things that we see around us. Okay, that's our present world. But could there have been other worlds? And in this book, I talk about all the verses that I can find about where God says, He created the worlds and this and that. Would that mean the planets, or could that actually mean the world, the organized cosmos is before this present one? there's another way to think about and look at things, and it makes a lot of sense as you get exposed and you actually do some research on the gap theory.
I agree.
Before the mountains were brought forth, or ever thou hast formed the earth and the world, even from everlasting to everlasting, thou art God. That's Psalms 92. Now it's interesting. Why would that say the earth and the world? What's the difference if we think about it the way people are trying to say and tell us?
Yes.
Right?
Right.
So this first chapter, again, what was trying to just show, especially it gets into the Bible. Like I was saying before, he also made the worlds. The worlds were framed by the word of God, etc. It's in plural. Why would it be in plural? Here's an interesting one. Show yourselves, men. Bring it again to mind, O ye transgressors. Remember the former things of old, for I am God and there is none else, declaring the end from the beginning and from ancient times the things that are not yet done. So I'm sure Sen will probably agree with me on this one, but when they talk about the former things of old, what I believe in that statement and others, they are talking about what might have went on in the world before ours.
Absolutely.
Before this present organized cosmos, right?
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, because again, the 2 Peter chapter 3, he describes the destruction of the first world age. And I believe that again is what we see defined there in Genesis chapter 1, 2. And then we have the present age, which will be destroyed by fire, being spoken of, that this world will dissolve in fervent heat. And this all happens, with the return of Christ. It speaks about the stars come crashing to the earth, that there will be a new heaven and a new earth before New Jerusalem descends down here to the earth and all of that. So yeah, I do believe that is what Peter is alluding to, the end of this age.
That's good. And another verse I have is, for as by one man sin entered into the world, and death by sin. Okay. Some people will say that, that this is proof positive that there was no previous world. But maybe that when we hear the word world a lot, we may want to just try to start thinking of that as possibly the organized cosmos that we have around us, like I was talking about, because there's a difference between the earth, the physical earth, and world. So yeah, one man that sin did enter the world when Adam and Eve actually did the deed back there in the garden. In our present world, there was sin started, and he helped to bring it on. So that verse is true too. It doesn't mean that there were not, that he was the beginning and Adam was the very beginning and there was nothing before him. It just means in this present world that we have, one man did sin into it.
Right. Yes, Adam was the beginning of the second world age. And what we see as modern humanity. But even in Genesis chapter 1, verses 26 through 28, we see that there's a pre-adamite, that these hominids were created on the earth, and they were instructed to be fruitful, to go forth, to multiply, and to replenish the earth, which shows that the earth is being filled again after a great destruction. And that what we see from Genesis 1-2 onward is the recreation, the reformation, and the reconstruction of the earth in its present age, and being filled again with new inhabitants. Because, as I mentioned in Isaiah chapter 45, verse 18, it says that the earth was made not vain, and to be inhabited, and that it was made a perfect work. And initially it was, until the war in heaven, and what led to the destruction of the earth in that present age, or that prior age.
Right. It was probably created perfectly the way he had it, but again, one thing that he allows people and angels to have is free will. So that not, we could sit there and blame God all we want for our problems and such, but we have to remember that's a gift of God is free will, and a lot of these problems that we now see and have had way back then are from the result of choices and people making and acting free will choices, especially these angels, right?
Exactly, yes.
We actually, in Philo Judaeus, we have, therefore I will not now proceed to smite all living flesh as I have done at other times. So that's interesting when he talks about smiting all living flesh. Could God have just wiped out any living people that were in these worlds before us? And could that have been done at other times? Because he can't be referring to the flood here, because he didn't wipe out all flesh. Noah and the people aboard the ark were saved.
Right.
So, and we talk about, again, no memory of former things, because former things, I think there was that veil. Once this new world was formed, God did not want us to actually understand and try to learn about the world before, because it probably wasn't important. What is important is the here and now. So the veil of learning anything about the previous world is there. And again, it's really not something that we should concentrate. We should be concentrating more on the here and now. But it's interesting when you do hear of old or of before the world, because they talk about the serpent of old. Okay, what does that word of old mean? It just doesn't mean he's been there a long time, or could that mean he has been there since even before the beginning of this world? Right. Of the very old time.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, and again, we see reference to, and I do believe that the Bible even speaks about the destruction of Atlantis, that in passages like Jeremiah chapter 4, verses 23 through 30, and Ezekiel chapter 26, 19 through 26 or so, that it speaks about, a people of old time, and how there was this seafaring people, and that they were drowned and taken down to the bottom of to the oceans and swallowed up and also in memory, and that that we would forget about them as well. But we do have these myths connected to what was the destruction of Atlantis in ancient times, and I do believe that that was a fallen angel culture and civilization, and that they had higher technology, ability, and capacity than we do now.
Oh yeah, my take might be a little different on it. That's going to be in the third volume, actually, a part about Atlantis, because it is quite interesting, and I do agree as far as their technology. I think that was a little bit too much for what God wanted. I think God didn't want too much, because again, I think he's always kind of there watching to make sure that certain people or certain groups like the Atlanteans, or if anybody lived on that continent, just don't get too advanced. And of course, we know where they get all that technology is from. Again, the fallen angels and the giants and the Nephilim before. They are very knowledgeable. These angels, these terrestrial angels before they're serpents. The serpent angels, they're fallen, but they're very, very knowledgeable. That's why you talk about the serpents being wise, is because they know a lot, and what they know is this esoteric knowledge, where you wonder where all these ancient people have been able to build Stonehenge and all of these astronomical clocks and such, and all these things that have to deal with these seasons and why, and where do they get the information? But obviously, it's for us. We know. I mean, there's something that they were taught over the generations. It's a secret thing, but that again, sometimes they were actually getting a little out of control with all of the advancements that they were doing compared to the rest of the world around them. So God had to step in.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's very cool that both you and I, in doing the work and studying the ancient Hebrew, that we came to similar conclusions. Not on, of course, everything, but a lot, as far as the background of the story. So
you know what, Zen? Cool. I agree. I think it's very cool. I think I think seek and you shall find. I think, if you
Yes.
really want to learn some truth, you just do some research and you get some books that they're all dusty, because not many
Right.
people read them, or you search them out on the internet, well, if they still have them,
Yes.
or go to an ancient library. A library would have a lot of ancient texts in it and such, religious libraries. There's a Jewish library in Chicago that I go to. So do your research, especially online. Now we got one of the best ways of actually learning these things is searching them out, like I did over these all these years. It's just when you get an answer, dig deeper and dig deeper. And it's funny, Zen, how we do come to a lot of the same conclusions. You and I never talked about Atlantis before, but of course,
Right,
it's just funny if we
None of this
research
stuff, really.
Yeah, the truth will out, and I think things will start to come to light if they just
Hold on.
connecting.
Yep. Hold on, brother. We'll be right back for final segment, everyone.
As a bookstore for truth seekers, it's our goal to make ancient manuscripts which were once held captive by secretive institutions available for public consideration. In our generation, where wisdom has increased, as Daniel the prophet foretold, we have access to many of the testimonies our early church brethren were persecuted for preserving. After being hidden for centuries, these manuscripts have been leaked from various sources throughout the earth, and it's our goal to gather these sources into printable form to make available for all who seek the ancient way. If you're looking to deepen your studies of the biblical narrative, find these ancient manuscripts and more at sacredwordpublishing.com.
With commerce being monopolized by major corporations, we feel a responsibility to return to handmade goods and to support individuals in the community. Sacred Word Publishing wants to encourage truth seekers to support each other, and one of the best ways we can do that is through offering this centralized marketplace where everyone's homemade products can be easily accessed by our fellow members in the body of Christ. Would you be interested in offering your handcrafted items in our store? Email us at sacredwordpublishingllc@gmail.com. Support the truth-seeking community by going to www.swpmarket.com. Many truth seekers are constantly studying alone. But there is a place where we can come together. The Digital Readers Club is our online ecclesia meant for those who've forsaken churchianity, but still want the closeness of a family to study with. Join us every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time to put together the puzzle pieces of truth scattered throughout the ancient scriptures.
Your partnership with Sacred Word Publishing goes further than the publishing of ancient manuscripts and weekly video content.
You also make a huge impact across the earth in orphanages in Myanmar, India, Uganda, and Kenya.
Your support is crucial for the development of the ecclesia of real truth seekers.
We thank you for joining us in hosting Secrets Revealed, Momentary Zen, the Digital Readers Club, Ask Me Anything series, and other shows that have helped lead so many to the truth of salvation.
To become even more involved, please visit patreon.com/sacredwordpublishing, where you can partake in exclusive, interactive, patron-only content and help us continue shining the light of love in this darkened world.
All right. Welcome back, everybody, for final segment. The show has gone by really quickly, and I do think that we should do this more often, Brett. Maybe like at least once a month. And, if
Sounds
you
good.
have time and availability. Um,
Yeah,
so.
yes, good. I'm looking forward
All
to it
right.
now.
Cool. All right. Good. Good. I'm glad to hear that. And there
You
is
could,
lots to talk about. So
oh,
and lots
no,
to share, and I think people will enjoy hearing that you and I are confirming witness for one another in a lot of the research that we do, and truth is truth, and I think that in seeking, it's the glory of God to hide a matter, and the glory of kings to seek it out, and so I think that's part of the work that we're doing, and so yeah, let's continue with um, you know what else you have got.
that's a great verse, and I like that. But yeah, I think that would be
Yeah, I
good.
love that one too.
Okay, as we go into the next chapter, into the deep, and Zen, this is more. I would like to get a little bit of more your inspiration on this because you have been more of a light for me as far as learning more about the Earth, the dome, the flat Earth, the 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 darkness. But I have an element long time ago when I put that in this chapter about the darkness of the deep, and I didn't connect all the dots basically as far as the rest of it. And I know you're very big into that, and you're very big into understanding it and explaining it and researching it. So maybe we can kind of shoot some ideas off each other here as far as
Yeah,
that.
sure.
But
Sounds
what I was
good.
concentrating on first off was more of the underworld and the darkness here. And the reason I get into that part in this chapter was because again, a lot of questions would come up, and God's judgments are a great deep. Actually, Psalms 36:6 talks about, okay, they talk about the darkness and the deep, and what does that mean? Of course, people will think it's it's the underworld, it's hell, Sheol, is it? They they
Sheol.
they they Sheol. They think
Yeah, Sheol.
it's something, and what I believe basically, again, because we've talked about he has chosen us before the foundations of this world. So
Right.
how about if you and I kind of bounce some ideas back each other about your thoughts on the darkness and the deep, and I will tell you my thoughts too on the darkness of the deep. A holding cell for the souls. What's your thought on that? Do you think possibly something to deal with that of the people before they're brought up back up into this world, or is
Yeah,
that more
yeah.
of just the holding cells of the departed?
Okay, yeah. Well, there's a couple of things that I could speak on with regard to the darkness in the deep. It is my opinion that um, in the very beginning, where it speaks about that the souls of all the spirits, of even all the angels, the sons of God, being created on the first day. In Second Esdras, it mentions a period of there was a week of darkness, and that everything was, in like the spirit of God, which is the Holy Spirit, and I believe that the Holy Spirit is feminine, but she hovered over the waters of the deep, and then we see that it was in verse 1:3 that Yahuwah said, "Light be," or in our Bible it says, "Called forth the light." And that light, in as I covered in the Great Contest One to Warn Heaven, that light was Christ, and that He is said to be the light of the world, and that the angels. It speaks about this in the book of the bee, in chapter 5, I believe it is, and it speaks about how the angels, before the appearance of the light, they had thought, and they were able to contemplate, and they thought themselves to be self-existent beings. Um, But then they realized, the angels realized, that when they heard the voice call for the light, they realized that the voice was the voice of the Father, their creator, and that the light that had come forth was the Son of God, and that he also was part of the pre-existent Godhead, and that he was given dominion over them as the leader of the celestial hierarchy, because he is the only begotten, the Son, the Word. And it was through the Word and by wisdom, which wisdom is the Holy Spirit, that Christ sang basically the creation into existence, into being. And so the angels realized this in those moments. But this is also the moment that Satan, the adversary, well, he was Lucifer at the time, um, had a moment where he wanted to exalt himself and to take over and to try to overthrow Christ and to exalt his throne above the stars and the clouds of God, to establish his seat above the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. And as I show in my trilogy, especially in the third book of the Flat Earth Firmament series, Paradise in the Sides of the North and the Mount of the Congregation, that this place is located at the North Pole, that the Mount of the Congregation, Mount Zion, Mount Meru, Mount Olympus, what is called the Rupus Negra, the Black Rock, that there is this mountain that is said to be the tallest in the world, and it's a lodestone, a magnetic mountain, which is why all the compasses point north towards the North Pole, that this mountain sits there and it points towards Polaris, which is where God, above Polaris, is where God has established his throne and established the heavenly temple. And so that's what Lucifer is alluding to. And it says that rather than him being able to exalt himself, God instead cast him down to the sides of the pit, and that he was, and the fallen angels that joined him, Legion, they now rule in what is Sheol, and that surrounding this this lodestone mountain, this Mount of the Congregation, Mount Zion, is an abysmal chasm, what's called the bottomless pit. And it's also called Havelgamer, the navel of the world. And there's a whirlpool surrounding this mountain, in that every 6 hours the waters are sucked in to this opening and descend down into Sheol. And then every 6 hours later, they are expelled out in a geyser. And this is what creates the high and the low tide. But that is the hollow earth entrance into Sheol. And that's where Satan and Legion rule from. And that's called also, the deep, that in Proverbs chapter 8, it speaks about the circle of the earth being inscribed upon the waters of the deep. And so all of the waters, meet and congregate around this opening, this abysmal chasm. And as I said, they descend down into Sheol and then are expelled out from Sheol. But this is what is referred to as the bottomless pit. I was going to say one other thing, but I forgot, so I'll go ahead and... about the Hall of Souls. There's something called the Guff. The Guff,
right. In Hebrew.
Yes. And the Guff is because I believe, as you mentioned, that we pre-existed, that we were part of the sons of God before our incarnation into flesh form, and that the souls that are going to incarnate into humanity, there's a precise number that are going to be born, and when that number is up, the end of days occurs. But anyways, when, just as it says in Jeremiah chapter 1 verses 4 and 5, the word of the Lord went to Jeremiah and said, I knew you before you entered into the womb of your mother. I had foreordained you to be a prophet unto the nations. This is not exclusive just to Jeremiah, but all of us were known by the Most High before our incarnations, and that we pre-existed before the foundations of the world. We were known by God. We were predestinated, some for even this particular time. And so it speaks about in the Chronicles of Jeremiel, and also in the ancient Jewish lore on the creation of the souls and the formation of a child, that when our parents come together in love and the egg and the sperm come together to begin to replicate and to form the body, that this is when a spirit is called forth from the hall of souls, the Guff, and given and shown what would happen to it over the course of its lifetime, how it should choose to be righteous rather than evil, the consequences of our actions and how they lead to either paradise or perdition. And then when we are born, we forget all the things we've been shown, and we are born as tabula rasa, a clean slate. But we have these memories burned into our spirits, so that when something occurs and we are walking our spiritual path or following the role that God gave us, we have moments of deja vu or synchronicity, and that we remember, being there or seeing or being taught those particular things in previous, in our previous incarnation, in our spiritual embodiment. And so that's what I've learned about, the Guff and the Hall of Souls, and as far as the darkness and the deep, and also the light coming forth, and how there was this period of darkness before Christ coming forth as the light of the world brought the world into existence, and all the angels being able to finally see the extent of creation and the wonderment of what is the universe. It says in Job that the morning stars shouted for joy. The morning star are the angels, and the angels are the stars, and shouting for joy at being witness to the creation, that this is what is being spoken about in those moments.
Yeah. I think you want to let everybody know that when you're talking about this, we're not talking about reincarnation. I mean, this is not a reincarnation.
No, we only live once.
Right. So it's a little, it's different in a way, because see,
it's very
the
different.
Satan, he's the great imitator, and he will try to take something that's logically that you can actually research and come to an intelligent, I think it's a good conclusion about, but it'll be twisted by pagan, by the enemy, by the rest of the world, the secular world. That's where you get this thought of reincarnation, because the different part about the differences is through reincarnation, they think that you could actually make this God-like state on your own, depending on your actions, etc.
Or be God.
Right. You can eventually become God over time, over next lives, and that's not what we're talking about, right, Zen? We're not talking about.
No, not at all. Not at all.
But again,
and I'm glad that you did bring that up, because that's very, very important and critical. And I do cover that in my work as well, that I'm not speaking about reincarnation, because as it says in Hebrews, we will live one lifetime in the judgment. And also one other story in the Gospel of Nicodemus, that Adam and his descendants, they were collected in Sheol after their death. They weren't reincarnating into life and different life forms and different lifetimes. That when they died, there was the promise that Christ would descend down into Sheol and then free them from that bondage, bring liberty to the captives, and then take them back into paradise and allow them to enter into their former estate. And so that, is also proof that we live one lifetime and we're not incarnating over multiple lifetimes and embodiments.
Right. Interesting.
Because otherwise that would negate judgment.
Right. Because there wouldn't be no need for God, right? Or his plan.
Exactly. Yes.
Or
his plan.
Main
exactly.
Right. The main thing we have in this life is to make the choice, make the right choice.
Yes.
Right. That's our destiny, or what we have to kind of do. It's interesting you said something about the stars and the north, and God sets his throne above Polaris. That is interesting because doesn't it seem one thing I've researched in the third volume will be about how about these angels, they do seem to have their own stars. That's basically where you hear about, he came from the stars. You start to hear a UFO type of thing, but it's really, if you think about it, it's really interdimensional, which what they're starting to say it is now. But again, what's the other dimension? It's the spirit world. It's the supernatural. They're right in a way, and when you talk about astrology, and you go on, I'm going off a little off topic here. I'm sorry, but when you do talk about astrology and you talk about looking to the stars and how that. It's not necessarily it's those things that are shining. It's the spirits behind them, because again, if they have their own star, you just mentioned that, and it's interesting. What I found too by my research, it's how they do end up corrupting, which would once were actually great signs of God in the sky as these constellations predicting the future. But again, the fallen angels, again, very knowledgeable, they started corrupting that and say, let me show you how to predict the future. Let me show you how to use these for your own benefit. And it was tainted. So, I really like what you're talking about as far as the deep itself. And it is, when I get in this book, it's pretty obvious, because if you really stop to think about any of the deeper spiritual elements, we talk about light, we talk about darkness, okay? Again, the light, obviously, we could just apply it so easily, is that, when we have light around us, even in the Bible, it says, Lord, lift up thy light of thy countenance upon us, or God, that's in Psalms 4:6, or God is light, and in him is no darkness at all, as 1 John 1:5. It's basically showing a thing. And you had Lucifer, actually you're talking about angel of light at one time, and again at one time he was what he had the music. He was like a musician on the throne. Is that right? So he was very high up, and as an angel of light. One thing I've heard, it's interesting, Zen, and you probably know this too, but they talked about some part of the fall of the angels was actually due to Samael basically was given this chore that when God was forming Adam and getting ready to make him the viceroy of the garden of this present world, Samael says, no, I'm not going to bow. I'm not going to, and we're not talking bow as far as worship Adam or anything. We're just talking about respect and follow his lead, right? Adam was not a god or anything, and Adam knew it. He was humble. He was very much trying to be in tune. I mean, nobody's perfect, but one thing he was noticed for is his humility. He tried that because, again, but the problem, again, which helped start this fall, the dominoes rolling, was Samael basically, and his third, or whoever the amount he could bring with him, is saying, why do we have to worship, or worship again? That's what he considered it as. But why do we have to serve under this man of dust? We're made out of a brilliant fire, a brilliant fire, supernatural fire. Why do we have to listen to this man who is made out of the lowest dust? And they even refer to dung sometimes as this low dust. It's in Jewish thought, dust is considered very low, and there's a reason for that, because God wanted Adam to be very humble in his way he was, And here is a worldview that we see nowadays. Christ, and we taught Christ, I'm sure, was humble and taught humility, and the Bible teaches humility. But we see everywhere around us, we see people talking about it's all about me and exalting themselves and this and that. So now we are starting to see the two seed lines and the ways of the world and the views of the world pan out here. So yes. Basically the first racist, the first person that was starting to actually think these bad thoughts was Samael himself. I'm not going to bow to this person of dust.
Exactly.
So again, and then and that I believe happened with the serpent too. Basically, the serpent. I don't believe the serpent and Samael are the same. They may have come together that time again to fool even the garden. But that's my thought: is the serpent was actually a top seraph, a seraphim, which are in the Bible. They're serpent angels, very passionate.
Right.
That's why they call. Yes. That's why they talk about them being of fire, because again, fire in a symbolic sense comes out of their mouth. They're very, very the rhetoric. They're very passionate. They both actually were, from what I understood, very strong worshipers of God continually especially before Adam came around. They might have had some fallen outs before this formation of this present world, but Adam was the trick, because the serpent did not want to bow to him either, and that basically caused him to be demoted and to say, okay, God said basically, okay, if you do not want to, you are going to be terrestrial angels now under him. I want to be terrestrial angels. I mean, before the serpent was I believe, and the research shows that he was actually just not a snake or anything, like I'm sure you know that too, obviously. Right. He wasn't a snake, or he wasn't a snake-like being, or almost like a human being. What's wrong? I just always ask myself with these people, and I watch these TV shows, what's wrong with the possibility of serpent even being an angel? What's wrong with that possibility? Being a very knowledgeable seraph or a seraphim.
Right.
I mean,
an enchanter.
Right.
A magician is what they were, a shining one.
Yeah. He's very shining, because the angels are very shining, and he's a serpent, and the serpents were very wise. And so what is wrong with that? So basically, again, he was in the same boat. So when that happens, again, you've heard about Lucifer being the light bearer, or the angel of light. He once was very high up in this, where we talk about light and darkness, but he lost it all, obviously. But I'm sure, as you know, these type of angels or these type of beings can actually temporarily show their old way to fool people, right?
Yes.
He even says that in the Bible, where he could actually mimic himself and actually
themselves an angel light.
Right. Right. So,
hey, brother Brett, we've got just 2 minutes remaining. I want to give you a chance to give out your website and contact information once more before we end the broadcast, and also know that you can find all of Brett's books at sacredwordpublishing.com. Absolutely.
The soon to be revamped website is Mystery Babylon, MYSTERYBABYLON, mysterybabylon.com. My email, if you have questions, because I really enjoy entertaining questions and trying to answer them, and I like to talk with people of the faith and commune with them, because it shows, steel sharpens steel, right? It's a good feeling when there are people out there that actually want to know about this stuff, and I'll be glad to give them what I've learned and found, because I think it's important, and it's so funny how it comes together. Like you and I, we do almost all of our research on our own, but we come to so many of the same conclusions,
Right.
So my email is mysterybabylon, again, all one word, at 1791.com. 1791.com. So mysterybabylon at 1791.com. Feel free to email, check out the website, and please definitely check out Zen's books, the books at Zen's website. That'd be great if you want to take a look at them.
Yes, and let's get together within a month or so. Give it 2-3 weeks, and let's do it again, man. I really enjoyed it, and I look forward to delving deeper into your work, and I think people will enjoy our confirming witness to each other's work. So
I think that would be great. I'm looking forward to it too. We'll start right where we left off here. We'll just continue down the line, because I think that's probably one of the better ways to actually grasp it all. Because when you start at the beginning,
Absolutely.
then you learned already will help complement what we're catching and what we're trying to show by our research later on.
absolutely, brother. Yeah, we'll pick it up right where we left off here, and we'll just continue, and we'll do a series and get through it all.
Sounds good. All right. Well, thank you so
All
much
right.
for having me.
Be blessed.
Thank you, everybody. Great talking to you.
Yep. God bless all. Good night. Shalom.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us for this video and this broadcast. We appreciate all of you, and thank you for your patronage. Please do like and subscribe and share with your friends. God bless all of you in your seeking.